Okay, hello everyone. My name is Emil Hornung, and I am very pleased that you decided to join this presentation, especially as this is quite late today. My talk is titled Building a Code Review Culture, and during which I would like share with you my experience and knowledge about the process of code review. At the very beginning, let me quickly introduce myself and give you a short context of this presentation. So I've been a Java developer since 2009, and for all these 10 years, I was creating, developing and maintaining web applications, first as a full-stack developer and lately as a backend developer. I've also been a technical or team leader in different companies and different teams, and currently I'm working at JLabs, which is 100% Polish company with headquarters here in Krakow, but also offices in Warsaw when I'm working, and also in Germany, in Munich. My experience is also in enterprise projects, so I won't be talking how it looks in open source projects, and also it might be slightly backend oriented, but even if you are a full stack developer, front-end developer, or mobile developer, I think you will gain a lot from this presentation. Okay, maybe let's start with a quick few questions to you to make sure you are still not asleep or sober enough. So could you please raise your hand? Who of you does code reviews? Okay, I think it's at least half. And who of you likes doing code reviews, actually? Could you please raise your hand? Okay, that's like 1/3, I think. That's nice. And who of you doesn't like it, really? Could you please raise your hand? Okay, yeah, there are still some people there. Okay, so my observation was that for a lot of us, code review, it's an unpleasant thing to do. Definitely not the best part of our day. I think we rather prefer to write our own code than review or read someone else's code. And also I think that many of us do code reviews kind of spontaneously, without any structure, without a deeper thought. And so my reason for this talk would be to share with you what we can do to make code reviews more pleasant for us and thus more effective. So, quick agenda. I will start with what code review is and what it is not, then why we should even do code review, followed by how to prepare good pull requests, then how to review code, in particular how often, things about checklists and psychological aspects, then a few things we shouldn't do, so don'ts, and disadvantages and costs and how to address them, and we'll end up with a summary. Okay, so let's get started. I think all of us here know what code review is actually, but let me clarify on one thing, because when we go to Wikipedia, we can see the definition that says code review is a systematic examination of computer source code. And actually, I don't really like this definition, mainly because of this word examination. So I prefer to use a definition that says that code review is a systematic discussion between two or more developers about changes to the code, okay? Now, what code review is not, what I would like to emphasize here. So number one would be that code review is not a way to measure code quality or pointing mistakes. What I mean here is that we should avoid this attitude that when we receive more comments, it means that our code is worse. It doesn't work like that. Actually, the more comments we have only means that the process of code review is effective. So we should rather be happy because of that. Another thing I would like to mention here is that code review is not an explicit quality assurance method. This should be done by tests, and this is something like Uncle Bob mentions in one of his book, that quality assurance should find nothing. I think it should be the same with a code review. We should deliver production-ready code that we know that we did our best and we know that it works, and not challenge our colleagues to find bugs there, okay? Eventually they will find some issues, but that's not their role, and it's not the role of the code review itself, okay? So before we will start talking about how to optimize the process, let's think about why we should even do this, okay? So for that reason, let me present to you results of a research conducted in 2013. And so the research had two parts, and the first part was a survey where authors asked developers about what are their motivation for doing code review. And so they can give three answers. So what's my top motivation, my second motivation, and my third motivation. And so we can see the results based on more than 1,000 answers. And you can see that number one, the top motivation for doing code review is finding defects. Then code improvement, then alternative solutions, knowledge transfer, and so on and so forth. And so there was the second part of this research. It was about analyzing actual code review comments. So the authors took the code review comments and tried to assign to one of this category to see what are the real categories of these comments. And so you can see the results on the right-hand side. And you can notice that number one is the code improvements, number two is understanding, number three is social communication, and number four is defects. All right? So this concludes us to the summary of this research that says that our study reveals that while finding defects remains the main motivation for review, reviews are less about defects than expected and instead provide additional benefits such as knowledge transfer, increased team awareness, and creation of alternative solutions to problems. There was another research on code reviews conducted in 2014, which has a very similar conclusion. They say that MCR, which is modern code reviews process, seems to be generally more valuable for improving maintainability than for fixing defects. For example, modern code reviews might be recommended for software systems that require high maintainability, such as long-lived software systems. And I don't know what is your experience, what kind of projects you are working or worked on, but I have never been given a project that was about to end in 3 months. It always was planned for much, much longer. And so this is the place where you should really invest in the process of code review. So let's sum up all the motivations for doing code review. As I already mentioned, we should do code review to initiate discussion about the code, to promote communication in general in our team, to share knowledge about the project itself, so to increase so-called buzz factor, so the number of people who possess a knowledge that is needed for project to be continued, and also for sharing knowledge about the programming language, techniques, frameworks, principles we follow, and so on. Another very interesting motivation and attribute of code review is that it spread code ownership. So instead of having my and yours code, we more getting ours code. What I mean here is that we trying to avoid situation when there is a bug on production and somebody says, okay, I have no idea how to fix it. It was John's code. I haven't seen it ever. So only John can fix the bug, for example. Yeah. So we're trying to avoid this situation with code review. Another thing that we do code review for is to learn from others and also to teach others. Very effective way to develop our skills, actually. Of course, this all leads to improve general quality of the code, and it leads to it decreases number of defects in our code, but this is some kind of a side effect of the whole process. Okay, so now let's talk about how we can make this process more effective. And actually, code review doesn't start when we are starting a review of the pull request. It actually starts when we are creating the pull request. So what we can do to prepare good pull requests. So the first thing I would like to mention here, which is the most important actually, is to make sure that your PR is small enough. And we can have different measurements of the size of the PR, but one of them, and most obvious, is numbers of lines of code. And so here you can see the graph from the book called Best Kept Secrets of Peer Code Review, published by SmartBear in 2013. And you can see the relationship between the lines of code under review and the defect density. And you can see that the defect density decreases with the number of lines of code, and after more or less 400, it's almost zero. So I don't want you to treat this 400 lines of code like a very precise number, because it will differ depending on what languages you are using and what kind of application you are working on. But I would like to encourage you to find this number in your project and try to not to exceed these numbers of lines of code in a single pull request. Also, there was a great tweet about it some time ago that says, ask a programmer to review 10 lines of code and he will find 10 issues. Ask him to do 500 lines of code and he will say, oh, it looks good. And I think you might be familiar with that, and this is how it really works. And one thing to mention here is maybe we shouldn't be happy too fast, too soon, if we are getting no comments on our review, because maybe it was so big that somebody didn't even look into it. Okay. So another measurement of the size of the PR can be how many issues it addresses, and I would like to encourage you to be sure that the PR you are creating addresses not more than one issue. Okay, so it's a little bit like single responsibility principle on level of pull request. So as an author, I should ask myself a question: does this PR really address one issue only? Or maybe I can divide it somehow. In particular, refactoring should be done in a separate pull request. Yeah, I really think that we should do refactoring as we encounter some problems, not as a separate task, but it would be very beneficial if we put it on the separate PR and then go back to our main work. Another example would be that main logic and the glue code might be in separate PRs. What I mean here is that we are creating a new feature. So, for example, we are implementing a new component. We can create a PR for that and then plug in all the new code into the existing one with the separate PR. Another idea to make PR small would be to create a pull request to a feature branch instead of a master, because for some reasons we don't want to merge into master only part of our work. So every other PRs would go to this feature branch, and then afterwards we can have a one big PR to the master, but we shouldn't, it is not, we don't need to review it actually, because it was reviewed previously. We can just make some sanity check. Okay, and if we, for some reasons, don't want to use those feature branches and this kind of division, maybe we can at least divide our PR into separate commits, so the reviewer can is not forced to review PR all at once, but commit by commit. It might be also very helpful. Okay, so another important thing when creating a pull request would be to give a context, a short description, a reason for the change. Okay, sometimes Jira link will be enough, sometimes not. It depends how good are your tasks in whatever issue tracker you use. Generally, put yourself in reviewer's shoes and ask yourself a question: what somebody else has to know to do a proper review. Okay. And quite interesting thing here is that only preparing a description will make you rethink your job and can lead to some changes. And this is actually the fastest feedback loop you can get from yourself. So it's also very beneficial. Another thing to remember as a PR author would be to put all team members as reviewers to promote knowledge sharing. In particular, new team members should always be assigned to the pull request, and also, especially junior developers, okay? They have to learn somehow about our project and about our techniques, so they should be able to see all the PRs that are in the project. I'm not claiming that they have to have right to approve or decline our pull requests, but we can also take this option off and just let them review and ask the question and actually talk about the code. Last thing in this part, the last advice from here would be review your code before creating a pull request, and there are also studies that shows that 10 to 22% of changes are self-motivated, so are done by ourselves. So again, very beneficial, very short feedback loop we can have from ourselves. All right, now let's get to the second part. So how to review code actually, okay? So the most important thing here would be that the context is the king. We should know the reason for the change, because same change can be good or bad depending on the context. It's like with domain-driven design, that the same term in different contexts has actually a different meaning. In Java world, for example, if somebody writes synchronized code, is it bad or good? It depends, because if we will be using this code in a single-threaded environment, then it's an overhead. Yeah. If we will be using it in the multi-threaded environment, then it's actually really needed. So we need to know the context. Next thing, as a reviewer, would be make sure that the PR is small enough. And if we see that we are overwhelmed by the PR, is too big for us, we should immediately go back to the author and politely ask him to divide it, probably also with some suggestion how we can divide it, because sometimes it's not an easy task. But we shouldn't let ourselves drag in by the big pull request. It very kills productivity very quickly. And so another thing as a reviewer would be to find the best place to start. Because our tools like GitHub, Crucible, whatever you use, shows changes in alphabetical order. Yeah? And so I compare it to reading a book, but not in the order of chapters that are appearing there, but sorting them alphabetically and then reading it in that order. It doesn't make sense. So my advice here, I am very fond of test-driven design and tests in general, so I'm seeking for a test that describes this change and starting from the test and then go to the code, the production code that fulfills the test and go this way. Another topic would be about the pace. So first of all, we shouldn't rush too much. What I mean here is to avoid a situation when someone is telling us, okay, hurry up, just approve my PR. Everything what has to be done is done. You're actually blocking my work. Yeah, we are waiting for the review, which is useless. We shouldn't take this attitude. I would say that code review is more like sightseeing than rushing through a highway. Because when we are going on a highway, our goal is to go from point A to point B as quick as possible. And that's not our goal in during the code review. It's not about giving a proof without reading a code. So it's more like sightseeing. So we want to get acquainted with this code, see some details, ask some questions. And so the more attention you will pay, the more details you will see. And this is what we care about actually during the code review. Natural thing would be to go through all changes more than once, okay? And also, if you have a 1 or 2 or 3-liner pull request, I really encourage you to try to take your stopwatch and spend at least 3 minutes for this kind of pull request and see how many actually questions you can ask and how many details you can see in there. It is a very interesting experience actually. And also, if we will keep in mind that reviewing someone else's code is more like an opportunity to learn something than just an unpleasant duty, we will not be having this eager to rush. Yeah? So let's keep it in mind. On the other hand, we shouldn't spend too much time. And again, this is the graph taken from the Best Kept Secrets of Peer Code Review book, where you can see the relationship between the average number of defects found and a number of time spent on the code review. And so we can see the more time you spend in code review, the more defects or comments you will find, but after around 60 minutes, there is no actual raise of this number, okay? And this is because how our brains work. So we cannot actually focus more on this kind of activity, which is kind of a passive activity, if you can say that. So we just lose our focus after the 60 minutes, and so there is no really a reason spending more time. If you stick to the rule to have small PRs, 60 minutes will be really, really a lot. But sometimes you will encounter a big PR that you want to deal with, and if you see that you are spending more than 60 minutes, just give it a break for like 20 minutes, and then go back to this PR to be more productive. Okay. So about reviewing code, it is better to read the code by yourself than having a walkthrough by the author. And why is that? This is because if you ask somebody to present his or her code because you don't want to read all the things, you will be listening to the author and nodding your head in agreement. But actually after some time, like, I don't know, few days or weeks or months, when you are you will have to work with this code, like fix some bug or use it or whatever, you will see that, okay, I don't know what's going on here, and why is it written this way? And you will be having a lot of questions, okay? So it is better to go through the code by yourself. Then, if a code needs some explanation during the code review, and you are not sure if it's you missing some knowledge about the project or the technology, the most natural thing, or maybe you are missing some other knowledge. So the most natural thing here might be to go to the author and again ask about clarification. But it would be a similar situation like mentioned before. It is better to ask another colleague about this code. And so if he or she knows and understands the code, then it means, okay, I'm missing something here. But if another person also doesn't really understand it, then it means, okay, we can write this code better. Okay, so let's do some changes here. And very important thing to mention is that when we are asking the author for some explanation, let's change it into code actually, because this is our source of truth. We will not be going back to our pull request to see clarifications. We want everything to be in the code. And so we should do some do it through refactoring, or if it can be done by refactoring, let's explain all these tricky things through our tests. Okay, another thing, a little bit from my autopsy, is that when something is written in another way, you would write it, it doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different, okay? In computer science and software development, I think for every problem, there are like tens of ways to solve it, and sometimes there is no strictly better or worse solution. So it's always good to tell the author that there is some alternative solution, But when we don't have any strict arguments for our code, I would stick to the rule that it's always author's choice which solution he would stick to. Okay. And we should also remember to, as a reviewers, to pay attention to mistakes and errors that appear again and again from the same author, because it shouldn't happen. This is why we have this process to learn from it, so this shouldn't take place. Okay, so now let's have a few words about how often we should do it, because I think you encountered this situation when you were waiting for a review for a really, really long time, and you feel that it's totally ineffective. So what we can do here? So I would say the most important thing is to do it on a regular basis, at least once a day. And I like stick to the rule that if the PR is created today, it should be reviewed tomorrow at the latest. Okay, we can of course do it quicker, but this is the slowest pace we can have. If you have problems with it, you really don't like to do it, you can try to make it a habit. Okay, so for example, pick one time of a day, like the first time you do when you start working, or the last time before lunch, or first time before lunch, or whatever you choose, and do the review at this constant time. And so it will make this process like more automatic and more unconscious, and it will be easier for you to get used to it. Also, sometimes code reviews are getting longer because we are encountering something called review ping pong. So I create a PR, someone is giving me comments, then I am addressing the comments, then someone is reviewing again, giving another comments, and so on and so forth. And so to avoid this situation, let's just quickly pair up and move things forward. But remember, do the initial review on your own. Also, to speed up things, you can try so-called draft PRs if you are using GitHub. Draft PRs is the mechanism that you can actually show the code, because it's a PR which you cannot merge. There is no merge button actually. So to show the code to the others, to make a chunk of the code as small as possible to review, to talk about it. All right, now a few things about checklists, and also a question for you. Could you please raise your hand? Who of you uses checklists during code reviews? Is there anyone? Like one, two, several person. Okay, that means that it will be beneficial for other guys. So, of course, we know checklists. We use checklists on every day. Also, there are in other professions they're using checklists, like the surgeons, pilots, cleaning service, and so on. And I'm sure we are using checklists as developers too. But yet we somehow forget that we can make use of them during code reviews. So I would like to encourage you to prepare authors and reviewers checklists. Yeah, so two checklists, and simply think of what is important during code review in your project, in your team, and put it on the checklist. You can have separate checklists like per person. It doesn't matter. They will differ across projects. And they won't be written in stone. They will evolve as the project evolves, or as our team evolves, actually. Important thing here is that we should put things that might be missing, because, again, for our brains, it is quite easy to spot that something is wrong. It's more difficult to spot that something is missing. So let's put those things on our checklists. And please remember that when you have a reviewer checklist, your own code should always also pass it, okay? So also use it for your own code. Now, let me quickly share with you my two sample checklists. So first for the author, and this is the very short one. So number one, check the size of the PR, a number of files changed, number of lines changed, number of issues addressed, and can I divide it somehow? Isn't it too big? Number 2, give a short description of a task if Jira is not sufficient. Number 3, advise starting point if needed, it might be helpful. And number 4, go through all changes last time. Especially it is good to look at it on the GitHub, for example, if you're using it, not in the IDE, because it's basically it looks different. Yeah? So you can have different perspectives, same as the reviewer. Okay, so my second sample checklist is for a reviewer, okay? And it's a little bit longer, but I hope you will find some inspiration here. So number 1, what was the task? Is the change described with proper context? What's the reason for the change? Yeah? Number 2, is the PR small enough? And does it address one issue only? And again, if not, I'm going back to the author and politely ask him to change it. Number 3, how would I implement it on a very general level? And this is quite interesting because when I try to figure it out and find that, okay, I don't know where to start and how to handle this, it will mean that, okay, this is the review I will learn quite a lot, so I'm more eager to do it. Number 4, which tests describe the change, so what's the first file to review? Number 5, is the code easy to read, including test, of course, and this is because we will be reading this code much more frequently than writing it. Yeah? We'll write it only once, but we'll read it a few. Number 6, are classes in proper packages, so this is about the modularity. Number 7, are classes, variables, methods named properly, because this is one of the toughest task in software development, naming things. Also, if you are following domain-driven design here, it is also important to see if you are following ubiquitous language or not making up some terms that are not used by others, or we are using not proper terms for some things. Number 8, does every new class have a single and clear responsibility? Number 9, is every change covered with a test? Number 10, are there any tests changed? And if so, it should be checked whether the change was necessary, because maybe somebody changed the test that was failing, now it's passing, but actually he or she changed the behavior of our application, which wasn't what this task was about. Number 11, are there any tests removed? And also, if so, are all of the cases justified? And number 12, is the code of good enough quality? And this is the very broad topic, but for example, I following rules like principles like solids, dry keys, Yagni, etc. But of course, you can use different measurements for that. If you don't know what measurement you use, you can also use so-called WTFs per minute, of course, as well. All right, so now let's get to next topic called psychological aspects. So we need to remember that software developers are humans too, right? No matter how introverted we are, no matter if we prefer to work in a team, or rather we would like to lock ourselves up in a basement for 8 hours and just code, we are humans and we have feelings, okay? And so also we have to remember that the code review is only a written communication, so we cannot hear a voice, facial expression, gestures, and things like that. You might be familiar with the sentence that words are only 7% of our whole communication, and actually that's not true. The 7% is not a real number, but it shows a tendency. Definitely, words are only a part of our communication. So we can also experience it, I don't know, writing a joke in email. It might not be funny because somebody might not hear the sarcasm, irony in our voice, all right? So the most important thing here would be to be kind to each other simply, okay? And we can do it by simple things, like using a word please, like reformat these lines please, or use word form we instead of you, like we are missing a test case for x equal to 0. And we can use also a form of a question. So instead of saying extract a method, we can say, what do you think about extracting a method? Instead of writing add a test with an exclamation mark at the end, we can say, how about adding a test? Or have you considered adding a test here? Or instead, you forgot about, we can ask, I would rather, what is your opinion? Okay? But also we should remember that not every question is a good one, because if we ask how in the world you could miss that, you know it is a quite aggressive, offensive question, and it's not what we are talking about here. Also, I would like you to think for a second, how do you feel when you know that the code review is only about pointing mistakes? So all I can get after creating a PR is a bunch of mistakes I made and requests for change. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't make me eager to create small and frequent PRs, okay? So we should be aware that there are different type of comments during code reviews. So there are requests for change, there are suggestions, there are questions, and there are also compliments, appreciations, and saying thank you. So I would really encourage you to give compliments, like big plus for using composition over inheritance, or thanks for clearing up this unused code, okay? It might seem as a very small thing, but in fact it is a small thing, but it makes a big difference. Also, a good idea would be to point places where you learn something, like, I didn't know this library, looks clean and simple, thanks, okay? It really make people feel appreciated, and it's really good to read such a thing in your own pull requests. And so you can see the exaggerated example here at this picture saying that, okay, at least we don't need to obfuscate this code before shipping, yeah? And so the rule number 1, try to find at least something positive. Yes, it is exaggerated, but I would really like to exaggerate in this direction than in the opposite one, not giving any compliments and pluses in our code reviews. And also one note here that there are also researches that shows that being kind to other people makes our brains actually feel better. So if you don't want to do it for somebody else, you can do it for yourself, actually. Another aspect here would be presented on this picture, when one guy is asking the other for some kind of review and to highlight things that are stupid, yeah, and the guy is taking the highlighter and highlights the other guy. And this is what we definitely should not do, okay? So please comment code, not people. So for example, instead of saying that you forgot to write a test, we could simply state a test is missing, right? Also in that area, please keep in mind that code review is quite similar to is about giving a feedback, yeah? So we can learn from this area as well. And so for example, we can use I message instead of you message. Yeah? For example, you didn't initialize those variables versus I don't see where those variables are initialized. Much more offensive and much less personal. It's better received by the other person. Also, there is this theory that it's really beneficial to give 3 positive comments on every negative comment. If we're giving a feedback to somebody and would like him to actually receive this feedback truly and apply some changes, it would be good to hear some positive things before. And I'm not saying that you should be making up some things, but be honest and appreciate even small positives. It really pays back. Okay, and also please remember that comments and findings are rather reasons to celebrate than to be ashamed of. So when I receive many comments in my pull request, I shouldn't say to myself that, oh my God, my code is, I received like 40 comments in this PR, I must be really bad at programming. No, it's not like that. It only means that this process is effective and we should be happy. Also, thanks to the code review process, we can notice that nobody actually writes a perfect code. Nobody is perfect. We can always talk about code and change something, clarify, make it something different. Okay, few things about what we should avoid. So, section called don'ts. First of all, do not do anything that can be automated. So things like tests, find bugs, check style, sonar, even size of the PR might be automated, yeah? And so let's use all the tools we can, because there still will be a space for things that can be automated that has to be done by us, by developers. So let's make this as small part as possible. Another thing I would like to mention is do not correct someone else's code. In that case, author will learn nothing, and also will be left with this terrible feeling that he or she is so bad that he or she cannot even fix his own code. So please don't do it. And last thing, we should avoid to do not pair same authors and reviewers all the time, because it will decrease the knowledge sharing. So the knowledge will be shared between those pairs instead of the whole team. It's not an easy task from my experience. It's just sometimes it's often like that we like somebody better. I don't know, we have a desk next to somebody, so we pair up with the same person, but let's try to avoid it, of course, unless you work in a team of 2 people. Yeah, that's all you will have. Okay, and one of the actually last topics I would like to share with you is are disadvantages and costs and how to address them. Okay, so first thing would be that another developer has to spend some time reviewing. Okay, and yeah, that is true, but actually this will happen sooner or later, because somebody will eventually have to use your code or fix some bug, or I don't know, change something in this code. Yeah. So thanks to code review, actually, it makes this time explicit that we need the time that another developer reads someone else's code, and it also moves it in time. It is much sooner. Also, when we can actually influence the code, we can change the code. Okay. So it's actually not so bad. And another thing would be that there is a time gap between creating a PR, reviewing it, applying changes, and the final merge. And yes, that is true. And we should do everything to make this gap as small as possible. Yeah. So do small PRs that addresses one issue only. We should do it on a regular basis, and all the things I already mentioned. And last thing I would like to say here is that the results might not be visible immediately. They are postponed. So if you are only starting your journey with code review, you might not see the results quite soon, like after, I don't know, 1 or 2 sprints. It might take longer time, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It works, but the results will be visible later. So this is the investment we are doing that will repay us slightly later. Okay, and in this case, we should only educate others about how it works. And actually, I think that's all we can do. All right, so let's just quickly sum all these things up in 7 points. So a code review is a way to collaborate, to share knowledge and improve code quality, but not explicitly bug finding tool. All right, this is definitely not a way to point mistakes and evaluate developers' performance. Number 2, as an authors, we should prepare our PRs, and the smaller we do, the better. Number 3, know the context, because the same change can be good or bad depending on the context. Number 4, review on a regular basis, once or twice a day. Number 5, do not hurry up, but don't spend too much time. Okay, find a proper pace. Number 6, use checklists, both for author and as a reviewer. And number 7, remember about psychological aspects. Be kind and supportive, give compliments and praises. All right, and I think that's all from me, so thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, we still have some time here, so just raise your hand and just ask it. If not, thank you very much.